Parents of Reddit, when did you realize your kid was stupid? Not just simple-minded but downright stupid. And how did you feel about that? My son is not the brightest. When did I realize? There wasn't a big aha moment. It was more along the lines of, are you kidding me? You don't understand this? Happening over and over. Had tons of testing done. He is low IQ. Not mentally retarded. Just slower than the average person. As a teenager, if he was in a movie he would be a lovable dumb jock. Oh, I don't know if this is gonna help, but I'm a dumbass and I tried college and hated it. If he likes working with his hands, send him in trades right away and not lose time like myself. I have 4 children. The 3 younger ones were asking me what their names would have been if they were born the opposite sex. My oldest child looked extremely puzzled. He was probably around 12 at the time. Finally he said, "How do you know?" He was legitimately baffled. My daughter then says, "Duh, she named us. What do you think? You came out and your belly button said this is Jake." I could tell so many more stories like this. More. Okay, this is sort of the reverse, but I have to vent. My mom was convinced my brother was learning disabled because he was struggling in school. He couldn't copy things off the blackboard, got headaches a lot, would get sick to his stomach and have to go lie down in the nurse's office a lot from the stress. The school district didn't think there was a problem because he could read at grade level. She took him to an independent place to be tested and they said, "Oh yeah, he clearly has some sort of disability, but we can't tell what kind without lots more expensive tests." She didn't have the money, so she just pulled him out to homeschool him in 8th grade. Fast forward to when he was 19, still hadn't gotten his GED, couldn't drive, and just played video games all day, living out in the country, totally isolated, never been on a date. My husband and I took him in, because we couldn't stand to see it, and because there was an adult learning center in our town that he could get to via the bus. About a week after he moved in, my husband noticed the kid squinting when he played video games. He swore his eyesight was fine. We had him tested anyway. He was nearsighted as frick. My mom, well, he said his vision was fine. My brother got his GED in less than a year. He tested in the 90th percentile nationwide and is considered college ready by his teachers. We're still working on his confidence, because he was told his whole life that he was learning disabled. My mom's not a bad person and is well-meaning in general, but dear God, it is hard to forgive her. I can't believe that that wasn't the first thing that she thought. It was the first thing I thought. It's kinda sad to see the responses. I'm not a parent, but I definitely know my parents thought I was kinda stupid. When I was barely a year old, I ran into a cupboard in the library and had to get stitches in my head. Over the years, I've gotten 3-4 stitches in my head due to idiocy, jumping off of beds, etc. At the family dinners, the parents always loved to brag about their kids. They would ask about my older brother and my parents would always talk about how he was winning all these awards. When they asked about me, they said I'm still growing. My parents didn't care too much though. They loved me for who I was. My older brother was smart and yeah, I would ask him for help a lot when I needed it. He shouldered a lot of it, but in my sophomore year of high school, he stopped and straight up told me how screwed I would be when he goes to college. He didn't have time to help me anymore, and so it was either I started figuring crap out on my own or just stay dumb. My parents always told me why it's important to work hard, and I think the work ethic part of me carried me a long way when I went to college. I ended up learning programming and now I am doing pretty well. My parents love bragging about both me and my brother at the dinner table reunions. I hope the parents don't live on thinking their child is a hopeless case. Some people just grow faster than others, but everyone grows. Just make sure you teach them why it's important they work hard for their future and they can't depend on people all the time. TLDR. Kids might be dumb, but they will grow. Sometimes you just have to step back and let them get frustrated with themselves. It makes them want to grow faster and you can be there to make sure they grow right. This is one on behalf of my parents. My older sister, 22, has been the brightest, but she has always thought of herself as the best thing since sliced bread. After she turned 16, she just started being extremely stupid, like more so than normal. She forgot how to use electronics properly. When they wouldn't work, she would throw them at walls, had really badly thought out replies, and her contributions to conversation were just dull. My parents assumed she was dumbing herself down to fit in with her friendship group, so they let it slide. It got worse and worse and she got bitchier and bitchier, so when we would try and help her she would yell and insult us. Think Haley from Modern Family stupid. Anywho, fast forward to last year. She had a boyfriend who was an absolute dirtbag. We know he was unfaithful now, after the breakup, in which he dumped her. So one day she came into the house looking absolutely devastated. She claimed her boyfriend would have to go to the doctors tomorrow and she was really worried for him. My mother asked her what was wrong with him. She looked my mother in the eye, worry written all over her face. He got herpes off a toilet seat at his work. The look of total disappointment on my mother's face was sad. She finally realized that she reared a moron. That honestly sounds like she has a disorder. How my dad learned I was stupid. He needed help holding a flashlight at his workbench in our dark basement. I decided to shine it in his eyes so he could see everything. Depending on how old you were, that could make you really smart. I can totally imagine that making complete sense to a 5-year-old. TLDR, about 5. When it was time for my daughter to go to kindergarten, I realized she wasn't hitting all of her milestones. So, I consulted a teacher and decided to put her into pre-K. I also started trying to get her assessed to see if something was wrong. It was just little things like not using scissors yet, things like that. There were huge obstacles just to get someone to look at her to tell me if there was anything wrong with my kid. At 7 years old she finally got diagnosed with a neurodegenerative disease. Her body doesn't metabolize cholesterol, which is gathering in her brain and killing it. Right now she has trouble walking, speaking and doing other things. Soon, probably within the next 2 years, she will start seizures and she will turn into a vegetable then pass away. So, in response to the original question about 5 years old, this makes me sad. Wish I had better words for this. Ugly's responses. You realized your kid was stupid when they fell down steps, right? This isn't about getting confused or causing messes or being clumsy. Realizing that your kid is dumb is actually pretty terrible. I have 3 kids. The first 2 were incredibly bright, walking early, talking early. The oldest was reading early. We weren't looking for signs of struggling with our third. I guess we had our guard down. He only started walking at 15 months. But we kept in mind that our other kids walked very early, 6-8 months, and didn't let it bother us. Looking back, his communication skills as a baby were pretty clumsy. His siblings all seemed to play with language, gibbering and trying out different sounds, but he would do very steady, consistent bursts. But again, a baby, you try not to let yourself put your kids into pigeonholes, especially not that early. Because he was the youngest, it was hard to spot at first that he'd lean on his older siblings to let them think for him. When he was struggling with a task, they would simply take over and complete it for him. The first time the thought occurred to me that something was actually wrong was when he hit 9 years old. We had gotten a new microwave. It was very basic, but a completely new setup. I noticed that he wasn't eating Hot Pockets anymore. I asked why. He said he couldn't figure it out. So I sat with him in front of the microwave. He stared at the buttons. Instead of trying to figure out the functions in this microwave, he was just trying to recreate the button layout of the previous microwave, as though the buttons had just been scrambled or something. He kept looking for a specific button. It didn't help when I told him it wasn't there. He only started using the microwave again once he could memorize the steps. He wasn't trying to understand the steps. Still, I thought this was just him learning to rely on his older siblings' problem solving. Why learn to learn if you never had to? I asked the most helpful of our kids to take a step back and she did, but it didn't improve. Problems with his video games, homework, chores, it didn't matter. Once he hit a wall he stopped, or would attempt fruitlessly to fix it, then stop. Show him a pattern enough times, he can mimic it, but he's not going to solve it for himself, almost certainly. He's an incredibly kind, generous and, thankfully, good-looking young man. Not being intelligent is not the worst thing. but it does make me worry about his ability to function independently. We pay far more attention to his friends than his older siblings, knowing how their critical thinking is going to become his new life patterns. I'm pinning my hopes on him finding a trustworthy life partner who has his best intentions at heart. Either that or hopefully our oldest two will continue to keep an eye out for him. I worked with a guy who sounds like your son. Took him forever to become an electrician. Incredibly frustrating to work with on any complicated task. He has an amazingly hot girlfriend. More friends call him in a day than call me in a month. And while he is basically skating by on looks, charm, and easygoing attitude, he's doing a dang good job of it. A girl in my class admitted to trying to charge her phone via microwave recently. She said she thought the radiation would charge it. She is 24. Her parents have to know she's a moron. I think my mom figured it out when I was in kindergarten and came home from school in socks because I'd forgotten my boots. There was about a foot of snow on the ground. That's not so bad. When I was 14 I went snowboarding in jeans. Got hypothermia. Granted, I do live in Florida. I've had to tell her all her life where to find things because she seriously was too dim-witted to grasp the concept of looking in more than one place. She's 18 now. Just the other day she couldn't find the comets to clean the bathroom sink. So I ask her, did you look under the other sinks? We have 3 sinks in the house. She blinked and looked at me empty-eyed. I walk over to the kitchen sink, bend over, open the cabinet, and there is a huge bottle of Comet. First thing when you open the door, I pull it out and put it on the counter and point at it. She just ducks her head down, cause she knows. She knows she has done this her whole dang life. Later on that day she's yelling, we are out of milk. I walk over to the fridge, push the Coke bottle to the side, and point at the milk. How many times a day for 20 years do I have to tell you to actually look? In my head is a voice that sounds exactly like my father, whenever I have lost anything. And it says nobody in this dang family ever looks under anything. If it helps at all, I don't lose stuff so much now. My nephew paid a stranger from Craigslist $5,000 for a used car with no title. This is after he was warned repeatedly not to do this. He's still riding the bus and has 2 kids. At the very end, like, credits about to roll of watching Frozen for the 2nd time, my 12-year-old son shouts, "Ooh, I get it now." It took 2 viewings of a freaking Disney movie for a 12-year-old to understand the overly explained plot twist. I wouldn't call my daughter stupid, but she has an IQ in the high 60s. This child is in 7th grade and doesn't know her multiplication tables, and not for lack of trying. She quite simply doesn't get things. It is quite unnerving to watch her struggle with many things most people take for granted. She really tries and puts effort, but she is just learning so slowly. She's a beautiful girl, kind-hearted, caring and generous. I have no idea what to expect for her future. I can't even imagine her graduating high school. I just pray that she will find someone who loves her and brings out the best in her. My son came up to me while I was eating flaming hot Cheetos and asked for some, then cried because I wouldn't share. So I gave him one. Then he cried because it was hot, so I got him a drink and he calmed down. Then cried because I wouldn't give him more Cheetos, so I gave him another, and he cried. He ate my entire bag, the whole freaking thing, with tears rolling down his face. I once had a teacher tell us about how to gently talk about the possibility of mental disability with the families of children with disabilities when one of my classmates started to share that her 4-year-old cousin couldn't talk yet, but he's so cute. The teacher busts out with, "He can't talk at the age of 4? Something is wrong." The girl jerked like someone had splashed her with water. "No," she flailed and reddened. The teacher got the dirtiest looks from everyone. Parents often don't notice. I knew there was something not right with my little brother when he was about 6 months old. I tried to get my mum to get him checked, but she didn't. Took my mum 4 years to realize. Turns out he has autism. We had one of those neighborhood cleanup days where they put a big bin on the block and you throw away your crap in there. My dad and I had taken down the old garage door motor railing a week or so ago and put a new one in. So when the bin showed up, my dad told me to toss the garage door opener in there. I wondered why he wanted me to toss the brand new little remote in the bin. Couldn't I just as easily toss it in the regular trash? But I got rid of it anyways. I was 16. I would say around when he was 8 or so. He's 14 now, so I'm hoping for the best, that things could change in high school, but I'm not holding my breath. He lacks a lot of common sense, and he can't think for himself in the slightest. He's supposedly ADHD, so that doesn't help either. Hopefully it's just a long phase that he's going to grow out of. In general, realizing people are stupid is disappointing. I think because we tend to see people as the best possible version of themselves, creating an unrealistic image of them in our heads. So when you realize a person doesn't have a quality you instilled in them in your head, it's disappointing. Like buying a giant bag of chips and opening it to only see 1/3 of the bag full. When you realize a good friend of yours is stupid, it's dang near heartbreaking. Watching them do something stupid is even more so. 2 or 3 years ago, I read an article stating you perceive people who you don't know to be at the same intellectual level as you. And, for me, I think it's true. When I see people saying or doing something really dumb, I don't understand why they said or did it. I'm not saying I'm a genius or anything, but it never really dawns on me that some people can be less intelligent than me. Stupid is a hard word. We know so much more about learning disabilities now that I can look back on many of the stupid kids I grew up with 40 years ago. The daydreamers, the spazzes, the ones who spoke funny, and I recognize their impediments. My own son is 10 now. He has a range of deficits that don't fall into any neat category. We first suspected something was wrong before he was 1 when he wasn't hitting the standard milestones. His learning disabilities were identified in preschool when his teachers, bless them, noticed specific behaviors like inability to follow multi-step directions, preferring to play with younger kids, poor motor skills such as tripping while running and not being able to use scissors. At 10 years old, he's a couple of grades behind his peers and falling farther behind every day despite 10 hours a week of one-on-one services. How do we feel? Primarily worried. The United States isn't a place anymore where a factory worker or laborer can make a decent living. We work hard with our son and keep hoping that one day the light will turn on, while knowing in the back of our minds that likely this is who he'll be for the rest of his life. At this point we hope simply that he will be happy, but we feel fortunate still to have hope. We know other parents who have kids with really serious disabilities and no chance of a normal adult life. We see those kids, give our son a hug, and count our blessings. I watched my 18-month-old son pour water into a bucket, tip the bucket of water over his head, cry because he got wet, pour more water in the bucket, tip the bucket of water over his head again, and cry because he got wet again. Then to get the water off his face, he started slapping himself. He was repeating his experiment to see if he got the same results. You've got a scientist in the making. I got to watch a couple of parents, my neighbors, realize their kid is stupid. Like any parents, they had gone on and on about how their kid, 18 months old at the time of this, is so above average. He couldn't walk, couldn't say a single word, nothing beyond this horrific grunting shrieking noise, couldn't communicate. No surprise given his parents. I'd bet my eyes there's not a single book in their house. My friend came over with his 16-month-old, who walked up to them and introduced himself, then went and unzipped the cooler, got dog treats and fed the dogs, and then got his own food out of a Tupperware container and fed himself. You'd think Thai's neighbors were looking at an alien or something. They were in such disbelief. They've never bragged about their kids since. I'm thinking that the parents of truly stupid children are probably pretty dim themselves, and probably wouldn't perceive their children as being as dumb as a box of rocks. 2 kids. One is brilliant, one is a little below average, and we all know average isn't that bright. Smart kid is lazy and completely unmotivated by anything. AVG kid is hardworking, ambitious, outgoing, charismatic, etc. Smart kid will probably end up becoming a neckbird living in our basement. AVG kid probably won't go to college. Instead, he is going to be the guy that gets a job as a mechanic after HS. In 5 years he'll have his own shop. 5 years after that, he'll have shops all over town. We're more concerned for the smart kid. The dumb one has qualities that more than offset any lack of book smarts. Redacted. I know how some of you new parents can worry when you read these threads, but I just want to tell you a little story about my experience. First, a parent worries about the baby's health. All the fingers and toes are there, born with the heart on the inside, eyes and ears work, etc. The second thing they worry about is intelligence. In our case, the worry came when my daughter had severe colic from about 2 months to 5 months old. My wife and I would run down checklists. Is she cold, hot, wet, tired, thirsty, hungry? Does she have a dirty diaper? Is it diaper rash? Is there a string on the inside of her footy pajamas? Is it too bright in the room? Does she need to be burped? The list was very long, believe me. Even holding her and bouncing rocking would do no good most of the time. We slept in shifts, one sleeping while the other paced the house with the baby in a sling, as this was the only way she would ever sleep, even if for a few moments at a time between crying fits. She wouldn't even really cry, more so she would scream at the top of her lungs until she would lose her voice, over and over again. We took her to the doctor no less than 6 times during these few months. They couldn't explain. We began to think she was mentally retarded in some way, as my wife has a history of autism in her family and her brother is severely autistic and violent to the point of being institutionalized for the past 35 years. I'll never forget the day my wife and I were at home with the baby, screaming at each other, laying blame on each other, wondering what we had done to deserve this devil child whom was tearing us apart. We were at our wits' end. I loved my daughter with all my heart since before she was even born, and as much as it shames me to say, I imagined myself throwing her out the fricking window to the pavement below. I just couldn't take it anymore. I had never harmed her in any way to this day, but I was ready to fricking snap. We were sitting there just letting her cry at this point because it didn't matter what we did anyway, and like a ray of sunshine after a tornado, she stopped, and she smiled, and for the rest of her entire infancy she was the golden child, who was always bright and cheery and never cried. It's as if she got it all out and never needed to do it again. I'm not a religious man, but the only word I can use to describe it is a miracle. It only got better from there. All through school she has always shown to be far above average intelligence, straight A's and a few B's, with a 98+ percentile in national test scores, and has recently been accepted to a rather prestigious high school on an academic scholarship. She not only turned out to be not stupid as we had feared, but incredibly intelligent. So those of you who are worried because your infant toddler is showing some signs of being less than stellar in the brains department, give it some time. They may just surprise the heck out of you. After reading many of these responses, I'm not sure if these kids are actually stupid, or if they just have terrible parents who never taught them how to solve problems and not be buttholes. My family was taking a trip to the beach and my stepson was in the living room while I was printing off MapQuest directions. This was several years ago, and I thought I would show him on a map where we were going. Me. Okay, this line here. This is the route we are driving to the beach. This point on the map is our destination. Stepson, oh wow, we are going to North America. Me. We live in North America. We are driving from Kentucky to South Carolina. He was 12. The kid I nanny regularly is nearly 2 and still falls on her butt when she tries to walk, knows maybe 4 words, and can't pronounce my 1-syllable name for crap. Sweet, happy kid, but dang. Mom is a brilliant entrepreneur but dad is a little thick. My stepson has always been dim, thick as 2 planks, no common sense, still asks at age 13 if something he sees in a movie is real, no aptitude for learning or problem solving. For example, we only realized he was doing Spanish after his teacher noted in a school report that he was not really grasping things. He had done it for 3 years and we never knew he was in a language class. When we asked him good-naturedly to say hello to us in Spanish, thinking maybe we could get involved now that we knew, he didn't know how. We didn't push it any further. He was a straight DE grade student throughout elementary school, except for phys ed. His dad used to cope by saying that clearly he was a good athlete. Everyone's good at something and that's his strength, right? Turns out when we got him into team sports, he was too dumb to remember the rules, do what he was meant to do, stand in the right spot. If he ever bothered going for the ball he would have been the one running the wrong way, every single time. It was hard to watch his dad process it all, especially since he was so studious when he was young. It is impossible for someone who just wanted to do well at school as a natural part of their personality to understand someone who struggles or doesn't want to try at all. It is also frustrating that all he wants to do is play video games, and he's not even good at them. He walks around Assassin's Creed punching people and not doing any of the missions. Just doesn't get it. He plays COD all the time but constantly loses it for his team cause he just runs around shooting and gets killed more often than he kills. His lack of critical thinking thwarts everything he tries to do, and I think maybe the army would be the best option for him, even though the idea kills us. The winner is that the kid is warm and loving and has high emotional intelligence. As a parent, you look at the good and the potential and you love them no matter what. Yes, it's disappointing that he doesn't have an inquiring mind and doesn't have any interests, motivation or hobbies, but he isn't bothered by it. And now we've accepted that he is his own person and won't ever be like we were as kids. We've saved money on science kits and magician sets and all this crap we wished he was interested in. Nature, nurture, there's not a lot you can do but accept them. Not me, but my mom's friend had a kid who she thought was autistic. She couldn't talk at all at 3 years old. She wouldn't learn simple instructions. She had problems with many simple tasks. About the most advanced thing she could do was walk. So after already determining the daughter was autistic, she took the kid to another doctor. On their first visit, the doctor told her simply, "Your child isn't autistic at all. She's deaf." If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.